All right, learning objective number 2 is for you to be able to explain major philosophical approaches for analyzing the ethical issues that we have identified, particularly in this unit, the animal and the environmental ethics. So why don't we go ahead and start, and we'll start with utilitarianism. So as has been previously noted, utilitarianism always faces problems of knowing what the consequences of our actions will be. Right? The decisions that we make are made because we know ahead of time what the consequences will be. And we are constantly asked to measure the collective amount of pleasure or pain. So what can we do to have the best consequence, or to bring about the most happiness or the least amount of displeasure as possible? On the other hand, one of the features of utilitarianism that makes it appealing to many people is its egalitarianism, or that's a fancy way of talking about its equality, or that no one's interests count more or less than anyone else's. So we are all equal. It doesn't matter our race, our gender, our nationality, our class. In an egalitarian system, utilitarianism says that no one person's interests are more valuable than anyone else's. Now today, many contemporary utilitarians extend this same idea to sentient non-humans. So just as it is racist or sexist to treat the interests of one group of human as having greater moral weight than another's, so too is speciesist to treat human interests as having greater moral weight than those of other animals. Now, I don't think I'm making this word up, speciesist, but think about these words, sexist or racist, but consider it from a species perspective. Is it speciesist for me to believe that the human interests are of more value or of more worth than that of animals? So, anyways, it's an interesting perspective, right? Are we all humans and animals alike? Are we all just animals living on this earth? Are humans just merely the most intelligent, the most rational, the most progressed of these animals? But when we are looking at this and we are putting on a sense of egalitarian glasses, right, are we looking at humans and animals as being on the same level? Now, with respect to environmental ethics, it is important to emphasize that utilitarians are interested in the effects of our actions on all persons or all sentient beings, including those who do not yet exist. And that's a kicker. So it's not just the people who are alive today, but utilitarians are interested in those who will live tomorrow, right? Those who have not been born. And so we want to ensure the happiness of all, not merely the happiness of those who are currently alive. So maximizing short-term well-being at the cost of great misery a millennium from now would not be endorsed by a utilitarian. All right, moving down to Kant. Traditional Kantianism would deny any intrinsic moral status, let alone rights, to non-human animals. But there are what we could call contemporary Kantians, people like Tom Reagan, mentioned in the textbook, who hold that animals have very strong moral rights. For Reagan, having interests is sufficient for having rights, and being the experienced subject of a life is sufficient for having interests. So simply by being alive, by experiencing life, animals or non-human animals have moral rights. The Kantian notion that persons must never be treated merely as things is applied in its full force then to non-humans by these thinkers. Now there are also broadly Kantian thinkers such as Karl Cohen, who's not mentioned in the textbook, but Cohen argues that non-rational beings by definition cannot be members of the moral community and hence cannot have rights. So in this context, many people, professionals and laypersons alike, have pointed out that non-human animals certainly do not themselves deliberate about moral principles before they act. So a lion, for instance, does not consider the interests of a zebra before making the kill. Now, whether this difference between humans and non-humans, right, the ability to engage in moral deliberation, right, whether this difference is in itself of moral significance, may be worth discussing. It might be worth considering. Now, with respect to environmental ethics, a principal Kantian consideration might be whether damage to the environment now hinders future's ability or future person's ability to live with dignity. Yeah, so I think about the movie, what was that called? Mad Max, and I look at this futuristic environment where pollution and rising temperatures have destroyed the environment and has made it very difficult for people, any person, to live with any sense of dignity. Now, moving on to this third topic, biocentrism versus anthropocentrism. Now, this is the distinction alluded to above. As defined in the textbook, biocentrism is the view that ecological concerns always trump human interests. Always. Ecological concerns always trump human interests. Now, the anthropocentrism is the view that human interests are always of greater moral importance than concerns about the environment. Now, a third view, which is not mentioned in the textbook, but I think is worth noting, is sentientism. Sorry. Not my finest pronunciation. Sentientism, the idea that the interests of all sentient beings are of primary moral importance. Now, this is the position taken by many contemporary utilitarians. Now, underlying all of these distinctions is the question of what matters intrinsically. Does an ecosystem have value in and of itself, regardless of its benefits, including aesthetic pleasure, for sentient creatures? Or is the value wholly dependent on the fact that there are sentient beings that value it? Right? Does an ecosystem have value just because it exists? And not because it's beautiful, not because it has natural resources, but simply because it is there? Or does the value of a rainforest, of a coral reef, does that value depend only on the fact that there are sentient beings who place value on it, right? Place value on seeing it? And this can be an argument that is made for and against national parks. So some of my favorite national parks are in the West, places like Yellowstone, Yosemite, Zion's, the Grand Canyon, Bryce. Right? Do these places exist, and should they be protected just because that they are naturally occurring, yet beautiful areas? Does it matter in and of itself, or even if it wasn't beautiful, just the fact that it is land and it exists, does it have a right to be protected? Or should that land be protected only because humans, sentient persons, place value on visiting and seeing those things?